questions to ask and not to ask during employment interviews, but some of the ones that seem to be coming up now is asking about military backgrounds. Since we'll be having a lot of people protected by USERRA coming back and looking for jobs, you can ask about things like your experience in the military, training you received, education you might have attained during the military. But what should you avoid asking a military person?
Most veterans will have on their resume their military service. I'd be surprised if they didn't. And everything you just laid out, absolutely fair game to go into because it goes to their qualifications for the job. What you want to avoid asking about are going to be any military service-related disabilities. They could be injuries, physical or mental. PTSD is really, as we've seen with the literature and the research, is very prevalent among some returning veterans. That is a disability. And if you go in, it's considered one under the ADA. If you start inquiring about that, you're exposing yourself to a discrimination claim under the ADA if you don't hire that person. In terms of other types of issues for veterans, you always have to keep in mind, USERRA, as you pointed out, you have to give reasonable steps to help a veteran get back into the workforce. So if you hire this individual, you may be required to give them some supplemental training, and what the statute says is reasonable efforts to get the person the veteran up to speed who's returning to a position or coming in new so they are qualified for the job.
So it's just looking at the gap in the person's experience during the military and bringing that person up to what others might have learned during that period.
Right. And let's say someone was called up for 5 years and now they're coming back and they're not familiar with a new CAD system. If they come to you and say, I need training on this, I'm not familiar with it, that's something the employer should do. USERRA requires that, and there could be problems if you don't.
Let's talk a little bit about other questions about things like health status and things that people do outside of the office, and whether or not those are valid questions to be asking during an employment interview. Can you ask at all about a pre-existing medical condition?
I would never, 99.9% of the time, I would counsel against that. Now, and the reason is, number one, it has nothing to do with the job. Number two, it could expose you to, again, a claim under the ADA. Now, if that person comes in and they have a visible disability, let's say they're in a wheelchair, they're using a cane, or, with the veterans, unfortunately, maybe missing a limb from service. It is a fair question if the job requires, let's say, someone missing a limb to carry 50 pounds. You say, can you do this job with or without accommodation? And the law goes even a little further. You could ask them to demonstrate how they could do it. So when it's a visible injury, or a visible disability, I should say, it is a fair question to ask if it's related to the job. Can you do this job with or without reasonable accommodation? Other than that, number one, I wouldn't want to know about any pre-existing issues because it will trigger ADA protections. And again, I would couch all my questions not in terms of what they can't do, but can they do the job? And just leave everything else out.